All right. Hello, Dr. Wood. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, April. Great to see you again.
Okay, if anyone is brand new, just want to let you know our episode 79 of Learn, Do, Become Radio introduces what Dr. Wood does, how he helps update and reboot your mind and help you heal from trauma and maximize performance and be able to really just live using your energy and creative talents beautifully instead of rehashing all the things that have gone on in the past. Did I explain that well enough? Or anything else you would add, Dr. Wood?
That sounds good. Yep. Very good.
Okay.
Trauma loops keeps looping.
Yes, yes. And the thing is, in our community, a lot of people come to us initially with this solution or looking for the solution to just clear clutter. Oh, I've got a cluttered desk, or I've got lots of papers, or I have, a messy house and I want to make it clean. And that was my pain point too, which is why I, started working here at Learn to Become. But what we found is that it's a lot less about just cleaning up your house. There is so much going on behind the scenes. And I mean, you know this as well as anyone, that our minds are in essence guiding this whole process. When your mind feels calm and safe, you can move forward and do things beautifully. When your mind is worried and you're full of fear and you're anxious and you're depressed and you're, getting upset all the time, it's really hard to do anything meaningful because you're just spending all of your energy managing that trauma. So anything you'd want to add on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great way of explaining it. So, because most people are taught to live and manage and cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, what, as you know now, right, with the program is that we say, no, we can fix it.
Yeah.
You don't need to learn to live and manage with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is creating a glitch, an error message, because your subconscious mind, which is survival based, is constantly looping through that trauma.
Yeah.
And your subconscious mind is fully present. So it's experiencing memory, trauma memory in real time.
Yeah.
And that's what's creating that dysregulation of your nervous system.
And it was so helpful. I think the line that keeps coming back to me over and over and over again is there's nothing wrong with you. There's
Okay.
just that glitch, or you've done something to help you either feel safe or these patterns that you created. So I think that brings a lot of comfort because then you don't feel like, oh, I just need to go get pumped full of medications because something's clearly wrong with me, right? Because that's how I felt in the past. And I'm not going to get into the whole debate on medication and when or where or what, because I'm not a doctor. But
Right.
and maybe you have something to say on that, but I just want to emphasize that to start out knowing I'm not broken, there are things I can do inside my mind and in my brain. I think that's just really empowering. But anything you would add on the medication side just to get started? Because I just want to make sure that we're providing as much good information as possible.
Yeah, well, a lot of times people are on medications, and medications, I'm not a big advocate of medications, except for the fact that if it helps you temporarily get through something in
Mm-hmm.
order to get the help that you need, I get it.
Yeah.
The problem is I see people who will come in and they'll be on 10 years of anti-anxiety medication or 10
Yeah.
years of depression medication. I'm like, that's not what it's designed to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
designed to help you get through it while you get it addressed.
Okay.
So, and again, just what you said, April, was perfect. Is I start off every session with somebody saying, "There's nothing wrong with you,"
Mm-hmm.
right? The reason your mind. So when people say to me, "I have anxiety" or "I have depression," I say, "You don't have that. That's symptoms of something else.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a symptom of another thing that's happening, the way your mind is responding to something."
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Okay.
because people identify with these labels, and what I say is anxiety is coming for a reason.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you. Your mind is obviously dysregulated. And
Mm-hmm.
it's dysregulated because your mind has experienced things different than I did or you did.
Yeah.
And so your own unique set of what I call atmospheric conditions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you grew up in a world that was dark and stormy, so and I hate this in case you got Seattle listeners, but say you lived in Seattle and it rains a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that seems normal, right?
Yeah.
And I'm coming from Florida. I'm like, oh, wow, it rains a lot here, right? It's a just different set of circumstances, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the way our minds work. If you've had a lot of trauma in your life, you're dealing with all that trauma. So those are your atmospheric conditions. And that's going to create your mind to produce thoughts differently.
Right. Okay. Now that's so helpful. And as Dr. Wood and I were talking before the recording, we were kind of talking about the outcome, what we want for this podcast. And initially, I just want to let everyone know Dr. Wood has an amazing program. It's called TIP. Well, is that the full name of it? What
Yep.
is that? Okay, the TIP.
TIPP, so it's an
TIPP.
acronym.
And
Yeah,
we'll have a
tip.
link at learndobecome.com/tip, TIPP. But so I want you to know his program's amazing. And it's a 4-hour initial session, but he has it broken into videos, a little smaller, more bite-sized. And then he has these audios you can listen to. And I subscribe. I'm part of your monthly group and I listen to your audios. I've gone through the entire program online, I think twice, and I've listened to all of the audios at least 3 times. And they're really good. They're amazing. And so his full program is awesome. But we had a lot of people saying, well, what if I can't come into full program right now? What can I do right now? So I want to talk about some initial things, and I've got a list of questions here to cover, but just want to share briefly my experience with this because I mean, I'm very familiar with Dr. Wood. I feel like I know your voice so well after
Sure.
listening to you all the
Heard
time.
it so many
So
times.
we're good friends.
Yeah.
But what has been so helpful to me and such a difference? So growing up, I mean, I probably started feeling kind of anxious feelings maybe around the age of 9. And I wanted straight A's in school and I wanted to fit in and I wanted to be an achiever. And in high school, I mean, I literally had rashes all over my neck, just stress. I felt like there was so much I had to do and I was always pushing myself. And as I moved into motherhood and then supporting a family and working with my husband and all the things we were doing, I started having a lot of meltdowns. I'd be crying often. My hormones would be swinging. There was so much going on. And I remember at least 4 or 5 times just crying to him and saying, I think something's wrong with me. I think I just need the doctors to give me something because I can't do this. So my husband is like super patient and he has worked with me and we've done lots of books and talking and he wasn't opposed to me going to a doctor. He's like, April, the doctors don't know you. They're just going to give you something that you don't know if it's going to help you or not. Let's talk through this and work through it, you know? Anyway, over the period of time and all the things I've learned going through your program and all these audios and learning, like I have 0 rashes. The dream that I talked about, I went back and listened. It was at minute 49 of our episode 79, where I said, okay, Dr. Wood, what's this vision you could paint for me? You know, that I could wake up in the morning and just feel peaceful and move through my day and get things done and address challenges as they come, but not feel stressed out and just kind of go to bed relaxed. And you're like, yeah, that's fully present. You just described this ideal. Okay, well, that's where I am right now, where I'm not waking up afraid. I'm not freaking out. I don't have the stress rashes. And I just I don't feel any need to go to a doctor and have them fix me because I'm like, I think I'm doing great. Like I still have problems and I still have challenges, but there's no more of that, like the panic, waking up scared and stressed and that type of thing. So anyway, I just want to report back to you on that, first of all.
Awesome. And you look great. So obviously
Thanks.
life's being good.
It is being good. And I feel so grateful to you for helping me reprogram the way I was thinking. I still have some more questions though. So are you ready to dive in?
Sure, absolutely.
I
Let's
was
do
so
it.
excited. I'm like, okay, what can I ask Dr. Wood today that's going to take me to that next level? And not just me, but our community, because I sourced questions from the whole community asking, okay, what do you guys want to hear? And you know, how can we get more support here? Okay. So question number 1, and this is kind of the main thing I wanted to discuss today. What about when it's not a past trauma? For example, I love that you've helped me with things like, oh, it was a really hard time I went through, or there was one event, or there was something. I know you've helped people like in the Boston Marathon bombings, or people who've gone through something like horrible that happened and then had an end point. But there are a lot of things that are cyclical. Like if you are living, let's say you have an emotionally abusive spouse, but you don't think you could leave because you don't want your children to now be alone with that spouse if you're sharing custody or something like that. So you're there to stay to keep your children safe. I know there are people in that situation. Or what if you are deep in debt and no matter what you're doing, you just feel like debt is just this weight and you don't even know how to process the past trauma because you're just in it. Every day you've got a new bill, every day you've got to buy food, you don't know what to do. Or if you're parenting and you have, you know, a minor who's living in your home who can't be independent as an adult, you're in charge of that minor And either there is special needs where your child literally could die if you're not watching and taking care of that child, or there's misbehavior that you feel like you need to be monitoring round the clock. So there's never like a time you feel like you can rest. Or if there's politics going on. I mean, we've seen that where there's just issues and it's just constant. Every time you open your social media, you see it. It's not like one trauma, it's like an ongoing tension. I don't want to keep going on about all these bad things, like,
Right.
or a stressful job or a stressful coworker, or you're living with an addict. There's just a lot of situations where I feel like it's not a past trauma to heal from. So, what would you say in that situation?
Well, that's a great thing because a lot of times people do have that issue. So if you're in a current situation that is creating stress right then,
Hmm.
that's why our program is so important because the current stress is going to activate the old traumas in a much bigger way.
Okay.
Because if you don't have the traumas resolved, then your mind is also trying to resolve those as well as resolve what you're in.
Okay.
So you may not be able to resolve the current situation you're in, but if your mind keeps looping through the old trauma at the same time, it's also trying to fix that.
Okay.
So that's a lot of energy being drained away from your ability to stay present and in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of like if your goal is to feel this calm and peace in the middle of a hard moment, it seems like we might want to come at it from a few different perspectives. Like one is healing that past trauma is just going to make it easier and give you more energy to solve it. I'm thinking some of the other things that have been helpful for me are things like if it's a parenting issue, reading parenting books that are giving me different strategies I can use in the moment, but I'm not doing it in a panicked way. It's more like, okay, this is a challenge. Let's figure out how we can move forward. Or I'm wondering how this even fits in with cognitive behavioral therapy, because I found a lot of help in learning how to shift my current thoughts about things in the moment,
Right.
before that trauma. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what current therapy is really good for. So learning to manage with some of those things that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So let's just assume you can't do the program. So you've got that old trauma that's also continuing with the current stress.
Yeah.
So the key in that kind of a situation is to train, like you said, read some books, figure out things that you can do to manage that stress a little bit better. Because if there is no answer, that's what creates the anxiety.
Yeah.
Because your mind is, did you know what the number one fear for the human mind is?
Hmm.
Uncertainty.
What?
Number one fear,
Yeah.
uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Okay.
That's the number one fear.
I can see that.
Yeah. So because our mind does not like not knowing a
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah.
So that uncertainty is what creates a lot of that stress. So the way to sort of do this is to sort of write down the things that you're dealing with. Like what are the current stresses that you're dealing with?
Hmm.
And then start to write an action list of things that you could do to address that.
Okay.
So for example, if you've got a child that is having, you know, temper tantrums or fits, and that's constantly, say, an autistic child,
Hmm.
right? Then seek out people who are dealing with that so that you can get some support, right?
Mm.
Get into a
Okay.
support group because you're not alone, right?
Yeah.
That's when you have to reach out for help because there's a lot of resources out there. Sometimes it just feels like you're all alone, right?
Yeah.
The big key is to understand you're not alone. There's a lot of people dealing with those current kinds of stresses, and there's support groups that you can go to. And sometimes it's just nice to have somebody you can vent to.
Yeah.
The, the problem is if you try to vent to people who don't understand what you're dealing with,
Hmm.
eventually they stop taking your calls
Yeah.
because it becomes, a dump on them and they can't solve your problem. So they feel bad because they can't solve it and they feel bad listening to you vent. But
Right.
if you deal with somebody, so if you have an autistic child and you deal with an autistic support group or other autistic parents,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it's just nice to be able to have somebody who can understand what you're dealing with and can lend that sympathetic ear.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm thinking, let's say someone has just lost their job or they've just had something, that's every morning they're just waking up or they're not even sleeping at night. They're just, feeling concern or worry. So just taking that active approach of, okay, well, what can I do? Let's start writing down some things that I can do and giving some control over that. But then I think my question is how would somebody know if past trauma and when we use trauma, I know you talk like big T trauma or little T trauma. Big T was like an explosion or something like
Sure.
that. Is that right?
Yeah.
But little
Yeah.
T is just maybe a something someone got mad at you or
Yeah. I
something
call
like.
those emotional concussions.
Okay, okay. And you have a new book on that. I just saw it
Yep.
on Amazon.
Yep. Yep. Emotional concussions are those kinds of things where maybe a parent was overly critical of you,
Yeah.
right? Always sort of put you down.
Mhm.
Those sort of build up those emotional concussions. You can never. I had a lady and she had had a mother who was a teacher. And so in the emotional concussions book, I talk about here are some of the things that will show up if you've had an emotional concussion. One of them is procrastination. And she goes, "Oh, I'm a real procrastinator." What it came back to is that she had a mother who was a teacher. So every time she would bring her homework, her mother would say, "Bring me your homework, let me look at it." And her mother would redline everything.
Okay.
So as a child, she's learning, I never get it right. Now, the
Mhm.
mother wasn't intentionally trying to hurt her child,
Yeah.
but that over critiquing of every single thing that her daughter did became one of those things where she can never get it right. So she would procrastinate to
Yeah.
try to protect her against that criticism.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it until I've got it perfect. My wife was like that. Everything had to be perfect
Mhm.
before she wanted anybody. I said, "Oh, so and so is going to drop over." "Oh my gosh, the house is a mess."
Yeah.
And I'd go, "It is? Where?" Like I couldn't see the mess, but she wanted it perfect. Well, lawn's not cut, or this isn't done, or, I don't want him to come over until we have the kitchen painted. And I was like, what? There would be all these reasons why, right?
And that was
Because
from a past trauma, like, for your
from her
wife, this
traumatic childhood,
perfectionism?
a very
Yeah.
critical father, right?
Mm,
Who was constantly putting down not only her, all their children. She had 6 children.
okay.
So he was one of these guys that thought he was the smartest guy in the room. And he was by nowhere near the smartest guy in the room. And I remember when I was just dating my wife, and I was sitting at dinner one day, and he made a comment on something. And I was like, no, that's not right. And
Yeah.
you could almost feel the tension in the room. Like, oh my, you don't say that to him, right? And he was like, no, I'm right. I know that's right. And I said, no, you're not. Right. That was okay in my household.
Yeah, okay.
And so all of a sudden he's like, well, you want to make a bet on it? And I said, sure. Right. And he says, okay. He says, how much? And I said, you tell me. And he goes, $20. I said, okay. And he goes, you have $20? I said, yes. And I pulled out my $20. We go in, right? Interrupt dinner to go in and check in the encyclopedias. We didn't have computers then, right? And he was wrong. And you could feel the tension in that
Uh,
everybody went because he had a huge temper. Everybody was waiting for that temper to come.
Now was
And
that trauma on his end too? Had
oh,
he
for
been
sure,
because
for
that's
sure.
where I mean, as you're talking about this, so procrastination, you said was, one way that
One
you
way
had
it'll show up as
when
an
it would show
emotional
up.
concussion.
Okay.
Yep.
Is having a temper another
Oh,
way?
absolutely. Anger
Okay.
absolutely is one. Um, Blaming other people when something goes wrong. So something
Okay.
goes wrong, not my fault. They
Yeah.
did it, right?
Yeah.
And what I talk about is if you want to be successful in your life, the key is to not blame other people, right? There's all these emotional concussions, and
Mhm.
they may be coming from, like I said, there's nothing wrong with your mind. Your mind is trying to protect you. Why would somebody blame other people all the time? It's because I don't want to take the blame. I used to get in trouble all the time. I would get hit or I would get beaten or I would get yelled at if I got something wrong. So when something goes wrong, it's an immediate look, there it is. There's the problem over there. It's not my problem.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay. Well, now let's
So
say you're living with someone who procrastinates or who has a temper or is blaming, maybe blaming you all the time. I think I was listening to the podcast you did with Dave Asprey, and he was asking about like, are there people, just a percentage of the world who are just sociopaths and psychopaths? And I thought your answer was interesting. We said you didn't know, but that you really like to have an optimistic view that most people are trying to do a good job. That most people aren't trying to be psychopaths or sociopaths. But if you're in a situation where there's someone who's narcissistic or sociopathic or psychopathic, and there's, or just someone who's really hard to be around, uh, is there any way that you can help them if they don't see that there's a problem? Or what do you do in that case? You just protect yourself and create boundaries?
You have to.
What do you
Yeah.
recommend?
Because the best thing to do is, first of all, have the understanding that it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about them filtering through their own set of atmospheric conditions, which is creating their mind to produce thoughts.
Okay.
That happened, chances are, long before you ever met them.
Okay.
That was the thing that really, if you remember through our program, one of the things I talk about is I tell that story about the two sisters and the atmospheric conditions,
Yeah.
and that things couldn't have happened any other way. That was a story that changed my wife's life,
Mm,
because that was one of the things that she always struggled with was, what if I had have done this? What if I had have done that? Maybe this wouldn't have happened if I did it this way, or all the things that she was struggling with. She was thinking that what she was experiencing with her father, that she had some sort of control over. She had no control over it. He
yeah.
didn't have control over it. He had a huge temper. He was very dysfunctional. And
Mm,
so for my daughter, or for my wife, that was hard for her to understand until she got to the understanding through that story that he couldn't have been any different than he was based on his own atmospheric conditions that created that anger.
yeah.
Chances are that happened long before she was ever born. She didn't create it and she wasn't responsible for it. So if you're living with somebody who has an anger issue or dealing with those kinds of things,
Mm,
you need to obviously protect yourself, protect your children from it. But at the same time, have an understanding, which, could also be a little bit of compassion,
yeah.
right? That they don't know why they're even doing it sometimes. That it's
Yeah.
just a response, right? And
And
it
that is,
doesn't mean, the great part about understanding is we don't have to be okay with it,
yeah.
and we don't have to let them off the hook. They're
Yeah.
responsible for their behavior, even though they may be filtering through their own experiences to create that thought or create that response. They're still responsible, but we don't have to be okay with it. We don't have to let them off the hook. All we have to do is understand that they couldn't be any different
I think
based on
that is really, really powerful. And I think I went after going through your program and learning a lot of these things. And sometimes I didn't realize it myself, but my husband and I went away for a getaway last summer. And we laugh now. We're gonna go do the same getaway, but we're like, we're gonna do it right this time because last time we were both super grumpy. We didn't even talk the way home. Like it was like not great. And what had happened is both of us had been dealing with some past trauma or just past emotional concussions, things that just have been really frustrating to us. But we were dealing with them in different ways where neither one of us felt supported. It was like he's doing what he needed to do and I was doing what I needed to do, but neither one of us understood the reason behind it. And so we were so frustrated with each other. And then anyway, we pulled over on the way home because we were like, man, this turned into a really bad getaway. We pulled over on the way home and we just started talking like, hang on, like something's up. We need to talk about this. Why were you so upset about that?
the,
Why was I so upset about this? We started talking and both of us just opened up about things we hadn't even really been consciously thinking about, but probably because this is what happened when I was younger, or this is what happened when I was younger. And now I'm doing this as a way to, make things better. Just the example, I won't share my husband's side because I want him to be able to share his own story. But on my side, I grew up with a mother who was like always counting calories and hardly ever eating, and eating anywhere, eating out, eating enough food. I mean, it was like wrong to eat. Food was the enemy.
Mhm.
Just because she had a lot of children, she gained weight and she was, wanting to try to lose weight. So I grew up like that. But she would tell me, she would watch me. And like when I was 9, she said, "Hey, April, I noticed you have a tendency to gain weight. I think you kind of need to be careful." And she would kind of be watching me as closely as she was watching herself. And I
Yeah.
would hear all the negative things she'd say about herself. And I just assumed she must think all the same things about me if I was gaining weight too. So there was this issue. So on our getaway, I'd brought a big blender and I'm making all my spinach smoothies and I'm trying to eat all this healthy food. I'm trying to spend my morning exercising and we're not even getting out to enjoy the views and the sights because I'm so busy trying to exercise and eat my green smoothies. And it was, but as I shared with him, well, the reason why is because I feel like I was letting my mom down as a child or something if I didn't take care of my body, and I feel this stress and overwhelm. It's kind of something I felt like I need to get over. But then it helped him understand where I was coming from. And anyway, that
That's
makes sense.
That that was awesome explanation. It's exactly what it was. That's an emotional concussion. Your
Mhm.
mother wasn't intending to hurt you. She
No.
was doing it in a loving way, trying to protect you.
Yeah.
But a 9-year-old doesn't understand, doesn't have enough life experience to understand.
Yeah.
So you started putting some meanings to it, right? And
Mhm.
then those meanings get stuck. And
Yeah.
so then that continues to operate and is still operating as an adult.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that need to get healed.
Oh,
And here's a great way to sort of, and what you did was perfect, because this is the way I always explain to people. If you're a couple and you're having, and your one spouse is, you know, expanding and you're having trouble, the best thing to do is sometimes just say something like, I can see you're really upset.
mhm.
Can you help me understand if there's anything I can do to help you right now? Right? Or would you prefer a little bit of time on your own?
Yeah.
So what you're said in that statement is, I can see you, right? I
Mhm.
can see that you're struggling, right?
Yeah.
Can you help me to understand if there's something I could do to help you right now?
Mhm.
Or do you need a little bit of time on your own?
Yes.
It's a
Okay.
perfect way to say it, because they may turn around and say, well, here's what happened today. Now I understand why you're doing this. This makes sense to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But if what happens is, if their expansion activates you right into your traumas,
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
you expand and then you stop talking.
Well, and sometimes I think the other person, like I was talking to a friend whose child was just yelling at them over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes if you say, "Oh, do you need space right now?" or something I can do, they're just going to keep blaming you. They don't want to stop the cycle. So I think maybe that's where the boundary needs to come in, saying, let's take a break for an hour and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more.
So
Sometimes
that
you need to be that.
key word though is understand and right now.
Mm,
So what you say to them is, help me to understand if there's something that you need right now that I can help you with,
mhm.
or we're going to take a look at this in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're not going to sit there and take it.
Right.
Right?
And I
So
think
I can help you right now. Tell me
mhm.
what it is. If you can't tell me what I can do to help you right now, I'm going to give you your space.
Yes. Okay. Now I've noticed with couples and with deciding on earning money, I'm just going to bring this one up because this is one I've heard several times. Sometimes often there are deep money issues, and that has to do with professions and choices and things like that. And I'll give just two examples and love to hear your feedback. One is there's a woman who wants to earn money and has an opportunity to earn money, but she knows or she assumes that once she starts doing that, her spouse will feel threatened, like, oh, well, what if you out earn me? Or you're kind of, maybe there's something from her spouse's history where he feels like, I need to be the provider. And if my wife earns anything, then I'm not a man, or something like that. We've also seen on the other side where there's a man who perhaps wants to take a different job that maybe pays a little less. So the budget would be a little tighter, and the wife, who maybe either grew up with a lot and wants to keep it, or grew up with very little and wants to be better than she was, is upset because she thinks, well, he should want a job that pays more because I want this lifestyle, right? And so there's stuff like that happens. So do you have any solutions on that one?
Again, it's all coming down to understanding and communication. So if you take the spouse that you're just saying is going to be upset if they make more money,
Mhm.
it may not be true, right? But
Mhm.
that may be your interpretation of what you're assuming would happen, right?
Yeah.
So the best way to do is to communicate and talk about that. Just say, I have this opportunity, right? I think it's a great opportunity for us. It could help me earn a lot more money. Are you going to be okay with that?
Mhm. But
Because I
sometimes they
wanted to
say
see.
they're okay and then they're not.
but you have to be able to say, I want that honest communication, right?
Okay.
Is
Mm-hmm.
there anything that would interfere, right, from your standpoint in me doing
Hmm.
this? Because
Yeah.
I want to take your feelings into consideration. Who could argue with that,
Yeah.
right? It's having that
Hmm.
understanding. That's the key. I understand, right? And I want to, if I don't understand, help me to understand
Yeah.
is a very powerful sentence.
Yeah.
Help me to understand what I could do, right, to make you comfortable with this decision.
Yeah. Well, one exercise Eric and I did together, I don't know if you know, do you know Dr. David Burns? Have you heard of him?
I've
He's
heard,
a he's a
yeah,
leading psychiatrist, and he's retired now, but he's written many books. He has a podcast, but his book Feeling Good and When Panic Attacks, his newest book's called Feeling Great. But he basically teaches a form of cognitive behavioral therapy that's wonderful. And in his books, he has this mood log where essentially you write down how you're feeling and what are the thoughts you're having at the time. So what's been helpful is my husband and I have sat down together. Sometimes when I'm having, like, I need to dig deeper, something's going on, I don't know why I'm so angry, and so we'll sit down together and we'll do that. And as I write down my thoughts and I say them out loud, and then I'll hit usually on the one that's the core, I'll kind of get to that rock bottom, like, oh, that's what it is, that's the issue, that's I didn't even realize consciously, but it was
yeah,
down there. And that honesty, you're right, like as we talk about that and I admit, oh, this is what I think, then he has a chance to say, I had no idea you were thinking that. That wasn't what I intended. And then, whew, I feel
but this is
like,
perfect. Great way of explaining it. So it could be, you could also say back to the person, so what I'm hearing you tell me is blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
Did I get that right?
okay.
And then all of a sudden you go, oh gosh, that sounds really bad when you just said it that way. Yeah, you got it right. But yeah, yeah, that's not very good,
I know.
right?
I
Or
know.
no, I don't think you understand. Okay, so great. I didn't understand that right. So could
Mhm.
you then help me to understand what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Those words are so powerful because it's the Mumbai tribe. Have you ever heard of that story? The Mumbai
Mhm.
tribe is when they see each other, they don't say hello. They say, I see you.
Mm,
And my
like
wife
that.
has a little statement on her computer. She says, everybody wants to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is if your spouse isn't feeling like you're hearing them or seeing them, that's when they get even more dysregulated. But
Yeah.
if you acknowledge, I see you, I hear you, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me, right? Is that, let me tell you what I heard and tell me if I got that right. No, you don't say you got it wrong. I want to see whether or not I got this right. Did I hear it the
Yeah.
right way? You're taking the onus on yourself because maybe,
Yeah.
right, I didn't hear it because I filtered through my own atmospheric conditions. It wasn't your fault, right? In communicating it, maybe I didn't understand it. So help me to
Yes.
understand. Just those simple words,
Hmm.
understand, right? And and just listening and seeing them. Sometimes just our spouses need that.
Yeah. Well, and children too. And I know
Children.
you, a lot of why you came into all this is because of wanting to help your daughter. And I would just like to know your perspective on, let's say you have a child who, you know, that there's some past trauma. I mean, maybe there's the anger, procrastination, some of these things we've talked about earlier. Or maybe, things are really hard for that child for this period of time. And I've kind of watched it happen. And you see these behaviors, and you could see the two pieces of the puzzle. There was the trauma and there's these behaviors, but the child is resistant to wanting to get therapy or to even talking about it. And they don't have the ability to reflect. I mean, a lot of things that I went through when I was younger, I couldn't talk about them for 30 years because I didn't think about it. It wasn't, you're not often introspective when you're 15, 16. You just do
Right.
things because you want to do
Yep.
them. So, what do you recommend for parents who are like heart aching, staying up at night worrying about their children because they obviously, yes, sometimes you have to create a boundary and just say, I can only do so much as a parent. I can't live their life for them, especially as they get into the teenage years. But what do you recommend when there's someone you love so much and you see it, especially when they're children?
I think a big key is to share with them maybe some similar experiences that you had
Hmm.
and maybe why here's some solutions I found, right?
Okay.
And again, if you come back to, um, I had this idea that maybe this therapy could be helpful for you, right? Is there anything that you could help me understand why that wouldn't be something you'd like to do? Is there a
Okay.
reason? Because they may turn around and say, well, because they're going to tell me I'm broken, or they're going to tell me there's something
Yeah.
wrong with me. You need to know what the underlying reason they wouldn't want to go get help. And then
Okay.
sometimes to say, listen, sometimes I may not have the right answer. Maybe we need to see somebody who can help you, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
I'm part of the things that you're dealing with. So I may not have the best perspective on how to help you. And I can admit that. So even with my own children, so I'm actually writing my third book talking about that, because
Oh,
there
awesome.
were, what I've learned about raising our children, and then obviously from developing the program, I could have done things better. I could have done things a little bit different, especially understanding now how powerful language and tone and everything are.
Yeah.
Um, so those are the kinds of things that we can learn from, right? And at
Yeah.
the same time, talking to your children and coming up, you'll be surprised what they'll tell you. You
Yeah.
may not even like to hear it, right?
Mhm.
At the same time, they want you to understand, they want to be heard. So if you don't take the time, or you just get escalated and start yelling at them or telling them, you're gonna do this or else, or you don't have a choice in this matter.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sending you to therapy. Well, good luck with that poor therapist.
Right. I know. I'm like, there's no point. Know, you
No,
can give them, online programs, you can give them therapy, but and I think that's great. I love the idea of sharing your own experiences and just creating an environment where they can open up and talk. And I mean, at the same time, there's the guidance. I mean, I was reading about addiction. Okay, I love your addiction series. And I don't have like an abuse of a substance or anything like that for addiction, but I went through them thinking like, I think I was kind of addicted to anxiety. Like,
mhm,
oh, if something goes wrong, I should put myself in the center of it. That was pretty much how I solved everything for a long
sure.
time. So I
Yeah.
went through your audios, and every time you would talk about, using a substance, I would think, putting myself in the middle and putting everything on my own shoulders and being anxious. So I went through it that way, but I don't know if how many people are aware of your addiction audio series and how different it is from most addiction programs. And I don't know a ton about them, but I love how you associate like where things are coming from in your brain and where your brain puts truth and error and
Yep.
how that works. How did you come up with that, or how did you learn about that process? And maybe you could explain a little better to help people who might be in that,
Well, yeah. I
spot.
mean, the idea is addiction is, I believe, now AA and NA I know have done a lot of help to help a lot of people. So I want to be
Mhm.
respectful of that. However, I don't prescribe to the theory that you need to tell people that they're broken and
Yeah.
that they're defeated and that they're never going to be anything but an addict for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's true.
Hmm.
I believe we're designed to heal. So the approach that I take is that once again, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
So the lady, I think I told the story before, the lady who came in who'd been on heroin for 7 years and in therapy for 7 years. And she said to me when she first came in, she says, I told my therapist I was coming to see you. And so he told me I have to be upfront and honest with you and let you know I have self-destructive behavior. And so I just smiled at her and I said, really, what would make you think you're self-destructive? And she looks at me surprised because she says, well, I'm sticking a needle in my arm with heroin. Don't you think that's self-destructive? And I said something she'd never heard. I said, no, I don't think that's self-destructive. I think you're trying to feel better. And I
Hmm.
bet you when you stuck the needle in your arm, you felt better. And she
Yeah.
goes, well, yeah. And I says, now the substance you're using is destructive, but you're not destructive.
Yeah.
That reframes it all. I have such a different outlook on addiction after doing and developing this program, is that everybody is trying to stop the pain.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They've experienced either physical or emotional pain. And unfortunately, the drugs or alcohol stop the pain.
Yeah.
And so now they're not a solution, right? But the mind, when does your subconscious mind want to stop the pain? Now.
Yeah.
Your subconscious mind has no connection to time at all.
Yeah.
So it doesn't see consequences.
Hmm.
Can't even figure out what a consequence is because it doesn't know what tomorrow is. and it doesn't know what yesterday was. The only thing it knows is now.
Yeah.
So when does it want that pain to stop? Now.
Mhm.
And so if that substance stops the pain, it's not saying, well, this is good or bad or right or wrong. It can't do that. It's literal. It's
Yeah.
a solution to a problem. And then because you repeat it, we have two memory systems. We have the explicit memory, the way we store all the events and experiences in our lifetime. Only humans have that memory system. No animal does that. Animals don't store memory that way.
Mhm.
But we store tremendous amounts of details about events operating in a system that's operating in real time. So you can see where this is what I'm talking about with the trauma.
Yeah.
This is where the glitch comes in. If your survival brain that's operating in the present is accessing memory from 10 years ago, when does it think the memory is actually happening?
Yeah. Right
Right
now.
now. And
Mhm.
it wants a solution to it. And so it's going to create. So when people say to me, I sabotage myself, I say, it's impossible. The
Mm.
brain cannot sabotage itself. It's survival based. So they say, well, how do you explain why I would do this crazy behavior or why I would do
Mhm.
this? Right? It's to avoid pain.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden somebody says, I'm on this path for success. And all of a sudden, right, I start going and I start doing stupid stuff. I start spending too much money or I stop, you know, going to work every day. I get in, why am I doing that? Right? Isn't that sabotage? No. I had a
Yeah.
perfect example. I had a guy who would come in very successful, making a lot of money, but he knows he could make more, but he seems to be hitting about the $2 million mark, right? And that seems to be where he plateaus. So we started talking about, he talked about his father, who was very successful, but he saw his father have huge ups and downs. He went bankrupt 3 times, right?
Mm.
Still made a lot of money and then went
Mhm.
bankrupt, made a lot of money, went bankrupt. So he was trying to say, well, if I stay at this level,
Your financial
I'm
thermostat.
safer, right? Like I'm not
Mhm.
taking the huge risks. He
Yeah.
didn't consciously think that. It wasn't until we started, he talked about how much he admired his father, but he had experienced as a child the times where they'd have to pack up and move, they'd lose the house, right?
Mhm.
And then he'd see his father rebuild another business, right? And then lose it. And so that is what his mind was trying to avoid was that pain of what he saw his family, his mom and his dad go through.
So if you have a spouse who is addicted to something, and I have several close friends who have spouses who are addicted to pornography and like just are hiding it, can't stop. It's happening all the time. It's hurting their marriage. I mean, a lot of stuff like that going on. If the spouse doesn't want to stop because that is alleviating a pain, like that's kind of the go-to for something, what could you do? What do you do in a situation, whether it's pornography or a substance or something else? But if you are with an addict who maybe does want help but doesn't, but still feels the pain and maybe isn't connecting, what would you recommend?
That's why the first thing we have to do is get to what started the pain.
Hmm.
Because if we don't resolve what started the pain, then you're not going to be able to fix it with just changing behaviors. Because changing behavior, you can change your behavior. So AA and NA are really good at getting you to try to change your behaviors. You
Yeah,
can't hang around bars. You can't hang around people who are drinking. You don't want to be around alcohol, right?
yeah,
All of those things. So that's changing your behavior and lifestyle. But if you haven't fixed what created the reason why you started drinking in the first place, then that fuel is burning on the sideline and it can
yeah.
activate again. So
Okay,
that's why what we do with our program, which is different, is we first address the pain,
yeah.
then we work on the behaviors.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to work on the behaviors. I've got to change it.
Yeah.
I got to get you to stop watching pornography. I got to get you to stop going, hanging out with your buddies and drinking.
Hmm.
That's like spitting in the wind, right? It's
Yeah.
really, really tough to do. So the best explanation I had is I had a guy, very successful businessman, had in construction, had hurt his back and got on painkillers and then got so addicted to painkillers. But he would come in and out of rehab, trying to go back and forth. He could still function at a pretty high level. And then his daughter had him go through our program. She was a PhD student and heard about it. And so what he said to me was different is he said, whenever I would get out of rehab or whenever I got out of a meeting with AA or NA, He said, I couldn't stop thinking about wanting to use. He says, ever since I've done your program, I don't think about it.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
it's so different because
Yeah.
we break that cycle that there's something wrong with you. Of course, you're going to drink if you are feeling bad.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you're going to do something, right? To help yourself feel better. I saw
Mm-hmm.
really the things that we would do to avoid pain. This was a fascinating article I had read about a German sniper during World War II. He said when they fought against the Russians really didn't have much in terms of weapons, but they just had lots of people. So he says the Russians would just run at the German line, right, to try to overwhelm them with numbers. So he said his job as a sniper was to shoot them, right? And so he said, but then there'd be another wave, and then there would be another wave. He says it was like relentless. He says, and then I figured out a way to stop them. He says, I shot them in the stomach. He says, now what happened is when the next wave came, they saw all their comrades lying on the ground, screaming in agony. That was the bigger deterrent than dying.
Wow.
That's how powerful pain is,
Wow.
right?
Oh man. You know, I think what you're talking about too is helping us to be more open to the fact that we're human. And I don't think that our society communicates that really well, especially on, social media, because, you see the highlight reel and, we talk about that type of thing a lot. But I think a lot of people genuinely think everyone else is doing fine and I'm the only one who's suffering, with XYZ.
Yep.
But anytime you talk to anyone and talk to them long enough, know them well enough and get below the surface, you start discovering there's just stuff that happens and it wasn't, anyone's fault that as a child they were interpreting things to mean something, or it wasn't, it was an atmospheric condition, right? That may have caused that. But I was talking with someone who was helping with a addiction recovery program, and they said, yeah, we just start every meeting where we need to say, I'm April and I'm an addict in recovery. So like you're always an addict your whole life. And that just starts feeling like your identity is I'm an addict, right? Like that's, and I feel like for me, I could have made my identity, oh, I'm just an anxious person. I just get anxious about everything. But I really feel like I'm getting less and less and less and less of an anxious person, where I don't think of myself that way anymore. I'm like, I'm a very responsible person. And you might say I'm type A and I like lists and I really like to organize my house and clean things. I think it's fun. But I'm losing that need to try to seem perfect or to have to have everything just right. And one other thing that I heard, just maybe one more quote, I'd love your feedback on it. Um, I heard this is one of the things I learned from Dr. David Burns, but he said, there's no such thing as stress. And when I first heard that, I thought, wait, hang on a second. I've been stressed most of my life. How is there such thing as stress? And his explanation was there's the way your brain's going to look at a situation and there's thoughts you're going to think about a situation. But there isn't like a, oh, I have this stress on me. Like, for example, if you have a full schedule and you have all these things you're doing and you're running nonstop and you're never stopping, what is it that you're thinking that's making you do that? Do you have a fear of missing out? Do you feel like you have achievement addiction? Is there like something else that's going on that's causing you to feel that it's stressful? Anyway, what are your thoughts on that? I
No,
don't know
it's
if I've said
actually very smart because stress, anxiety, all those different things are symptoms. They're not
mm-hmm,
what you have. So
mm-hmm,
many people, like you said, just want to identify, I'm an anxious person. No,
mm-hmm,
you have anxiety, right? That is being caused by a specific way your mind is operating.
yeah,
Anytime you have this is the best way to explain it. Anytime you have an emotion, the purpose of the emotion is a call for an action.
mm-hmm,
It wants you to do something. So why are you anxious? Because your mind wants you to do something, right? And this is why I say you write down these things. What is it that I need to do? And when do I need to do it?
mm-hmm,
Because that takes out that anxiety.
yeah,
Because here's a great example. We had a business situation, and we ended up in a legal battle with a company. And so I had a big deposition that I had to get into, right? Well, we had sued them.
Wow.
And so on the Sunday night before the depositions on Monday, I said to my wife, I said, let's go to dinner and grab a movie. And she's going, how can you think about going to dinner and a movie with what you've got going on this week? And I went like, what? She goes, aren't you worried about this week and what's coming up? And I said, well, no. What do you want me to worry about? And she says, well, what if they ask you this? Or what if they ask you that? And I says, I have no idea what they're going to ask me.
Mhm.
So why would I worry about what they're going to ask me? Chances are I would try to ask myself questions that they're not even going to ask.
Yeah.
I says, when I show up, right, I'll deal with it. But
Mhm.
there's nothing I can do about it tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so
Impressive.
unless there's an action that you can take, right? And that's the way to train your mind. If
Mhm.
you feel anxious, identify what is it that my mind wants me to do?
Yeah.
And then ask, is it possible?
Yeah. Okay.
So you remember when I say when we go through the program, the idea is I want your mind to produce thoughts that are beneficial, appealing, and possible.
Yeah, I'm always interested in those words. How did you select those words?
Because you can't have two out of the three. They all have to combine together. It's a perfect combination.
Okay.
So you take somebody who's in addiction, right?
Yeah.
And they'll say, I want to have a drink, right? Is it appealing? Yes. Is it possible? Yes. Is it beneficial?
Mm. Well, yes, in the moment, if you're like,
But not, it's not long-term beneficial.
yeah,
So
yeah.
really is not going to provide the benefit.
Mm.
So if you then anytime you're feeling an emotion or you're thinking about doing something, you then have to ask yourself, is it beneficial, appealing, and possible? And
Mm.
so again, sometimes your mind is asking for things for you to do that aren't possible.
Yeah.
So if it's not possible, then we don't need to be thinking about it, right?
I
And
love
so
that.
you
Yeah.
have to train your mind to do that
Yeah.
because it will constantly try to protect you. It's in survival mode all the time. And so you can do little things like there's a one of the things. So if you get anxiety, say somebody gets anxiety in their chest or they feel it in their stomach, wherever you feel it, here's a little technique that you can practice to sort of do that. So you can say, right now, I am aware of the sensation in my chest right now. So you use the, and I'll explain a little bit more about this. The idea is what are you doing when you say right now? You're bringing yourself into the present.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right now, I, right? This is
Mhm.
my chest.
Yeah.
I am aware of the sensation in my chest right now. So when you say those words, you're bringing yourself into the present, you're becoming aware of the sensation, and then you finish with this. So what?
I love that.
So what? Right? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
aware of it. So what? What do you
Okay.
want me to do? Is there something I can do? Well, no, we're just
Yeah.
worried about what's gonna happen in next week's Friday meeting. Oh, so what?
Yeah.
I can't worry about that.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it when I show up on Friday.
Yeah.
That was the attitude that I always had because my mind had been trained that way as a child. I
Mhm.
could only deal, and I had the fortunate blessing of being raised by people who were truly the most present people I've ever met. I mean, they were
Awesome.
always present. And so because they figured out how to keep my nervous system regulated, I was naturally able to do that. That made no sense to my wife.
Yeah.
The way she explained it, and not in a schizophrenic way, but she would say, I have nonstop chatter. I can't stop the chatter. How do you just sit there and veg out? That made no sense to her. Now she can do it, but she couldn't do it at the time because she would just said, my mind would never stop
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
And why did it do that? Because she'd been hurt.
Yeah.
So the world was not a safe place. I had a lady come in about a month ago. her husband is a professional athlete, at a very high level. And when she heard me on a podcast talking about my wife, my wife's this great example. I said, even though we were doing really well, we had a beautiful home, we had three beautiful children, business was doing well, and yet she wasn't happy. And she couldn't tell you why she wasn't happy. She just
Mhm.
didn't know why. And didn't make any sense to me. How could you not be enjoying this? What is it about this that is not good enough? And she couldn't explain it. The only thing that she could come up with, right, was that something was going to go wrong, because
Mm,
that's the way she'd experienced life. When things were okay when she was a child, they could stop in an instant when her father would lose it.
yeah.
So, what as a child had she learned? Don't get too excited about when things are okay. It just means danger's still coming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so for her, she didn't know she was doing it. It was below her conscious awareness. But even when things are going well, her mind was saying, look out, it's coming. Can't see it, it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to end. Something's going to go wrong.
Or it's a guilt that you feel like if I am feeling good, well, I should be worried about all the problems in the world and doing something more about it because who am I to just sit here and enjoy my life? Like I know I've had that kind of thought too. But what
Right.
you've taught me is that feeling of calm and not having the mind, the constant chatter, that's what I want to be my normal. So now I'm a lot more sensitive to the spikes that I might experience and I'm quicker to bring them back. Like I had something I had to do, a decision I had to make a few weeks ago, and it was making me sick. I was like, oh, I feel so terrible. I had to do this. So I went through and did your 10 picture reframe and I,
Yep.
took the memory and I scrambled it all up. And now, I didn't even think that till this morning as I was getting ready to record with you. I thought, oh, I haven't even thought about that for weeks because as soon as I did that, it just kind of processed it, made it from, the high definition to the lower definition. I also
Yep.
noticed when I'm getting a little like frustrated, I won't say stressed out. Stress doesn't exist. Whatever it is, when I'm starting to think, oh, I have so much I need to get done, I kind of pause and think, wait a second, why am I putting myself into this? What do I really need to get done today? And if I'm trying to do someone else's responsibility, because I think like I'm learning how to create healthier boundaries and and healthier expectations. My husband was laughing at me the other day though, because I set this goal to be able to run. It's like we do this little 3 mile loop sometimes. And I had this goal that I wanted to be able to jog the first half. And I'd done it 2 days in a row. And the third day I thought, okay, I'm gonna jog all the way and then I'm gonna maybe even do half the way back. I was gonna try to stretch myself. But I hadn't slept well the night before and I wasn't feeling super energetic. And so as we're jogging, I said, yeah, I don't think today is the day I'm gonna be able to, do all that running. And my husband's like, you should feel guilty about it the entire walk and not let yourself enjoy this because if you're not setting this reaching this goal, clearly something's wrong with you. He's just joking because he knows that's the way I, sort of think
Yeah.
about it. So I'm learning how to kind of laugh at myself when I do expect too much or I'm getting into that mode, and I'm learning how to think myself out of it too
Yep.
quickly and get back to it. So that's been amazing.
Well, there's where the best way to diffuse all of that is indifference. There's where
Okay.
that's so
I need
what.
to learn more about that. Okay. So what?
That's where that's so what, right? And so think about, you take your child to the mall, right? And you have to go home because you got to have dinner, right? And your child says,
Yeah.
"But I want an ice cream." And you say, "No, we have to go home. We'll eat dinner. You can't have ice cream before dinner." So the child lies down on the ground, starts screaming and kicking. If you take the child and you get ice cream, what are the chances that you're going to go to
Uh,
the mall the next time,
oh, I
right?
learned that early on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the way to diffuse that is to say, "All right, whatever, right? When
Mm,
you're finished, we're leaving to go home, but we're not getting ice cream." You just take that so what attitude. Indifference diffuses everything, right?
yeah,
And
it's
so
true.
if you've got all these things going on, you're thinking about all these things, and you just go, so what? Like,
Yeah.
is that anything I can do about what my mind wants
Mhm.
me to do right now? No. Then so what?
Yeah, and I think it's having that balance of I still want to be a goal setter. I still want to be able to do things that I'm excited about, but being able to take that more indifferent approach, like, yeah, this is the goal I have and I'm working on it because I think it sounds fun and it's something to work towards. And this maybe could make me healthier or help more people or whatever. But it's learning that balance so that I don't have the achievement addiction, or I don't think my value is based on numbers or, how many tasks I check off in a day. That used to be a big part of my value was, well, how many points do I have at school? They had this they had this gold W that you could get. Wilson High School was my high school growing up. And they had this gold W you could earn if you got a certain number of points. And you got points by being in clubs and doing sports or activities or whatever. And anyway, they had a diamond W that you could get if you got like all the points. So I got the diamond W because I'm like, I want all the points, that you could possibly get. But I spread myself so thin. I was exhausted trying to like reach for this diamond W. And so, looking back on it, I there's a lot of good that came from, participation. I got a full ride scholarship to college. Like a lot of great things came out of that. But I'm learning that those patterns that not just me, but that like society establishes is kind of putting you in a spot where you feel like you're always just running and racing to try to get a stamp of approval.
Yep.
And that indifference, I think, sometimes that feels a little scary because you think, no, 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 Dr. Wood, I've been trained to be an achiever. This
Yep.
indifference is not going to serve that. And so I don't know, any final thoughts on that? And then we'll
Practice it. Oops, I lost my light.
Oh, okay.
Hold on one second. Here's
Okay.
a tool to fix it.
You're good. I love it.
Here's what I do. They gave me a ball.
Oh, good. So you can throw it.
Lights go off, and I throw the ball across the room. It passes the light sensor.
I love it.
And I got pretty good at catching it when it comes back, but I had my briefcase there and it hit the briefcase.
It's all good. It's all good.
It's just coming up with a solution, right?
Yeah. And so what? The light went off.
So what? And again, but that's why I say the idea is and the audios are designed to do that. Is it beneficial, appealing, and possible? And if you use that criteria, whenever you feel that stress come up, right? Is what my mind want me to do, is that beneficial? Maybe it is. Is it appealing? Yes, it is. But is it possible right now? And if it's not possible to do, like that, my wife was saying, aren't you worried about what they're going to ask you? It's not possible.
And it's not beneficial for you to sit and worry.
Right? So it doesn't fit the criteria. If it doesn't fit the criteria, you can go, so what?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference. I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. So I'll deal with it when it's time to deal with it. Right?
Love it. Well, and you do these things, like, and maybe it was natural to you. It sounds like it kind of was, but you articulated it and put it into a good formula. Whenever I share with my husband the things that I learned from you, he does all these things naturally too. So then when I say, oh, hey, guess what? Dr. Wood just told me to use these 3 criteria. He's just like, I am so glad that someone else can tell you the same thing I've been telling you your whole life, but you're going to listen. And anyway, I love it. So
it's so true. And that's what I was talking about with a parent. Sometimes the parent isn't the best person to help their child, right? Because we're too close to them, right? We're actually part of the problem.
Yes.
So they need sometimes somebody outside to come in and help with that, right?
Yeah.
And that happens in our lives too, with our own kids.
Yes. Well, I mean, you are doing amazing work. I am one of your biggest fans. It has changed my life. It's something I recommend to all of my friends, family, our community here at Learn to Become. Again, we'll have a link to Dr. Wood's program. It's learntobecome.com/tip, TIPP. Come to the show notes page and we'll have, more links so you can check it out there. But I mean, Dr. Wood, I'm so proud of you and what you've created and what you're doing. Any kind of final words of encouragement for our community?
Yeah, I said sometimes just go to the testimonials, because a lot of times people will see a testimonial that it relates to them.
Yeah.
Oh, that person is what I was dealing with, or that person is what I was dealing with. Because it works in so many different areas, whether you're dealing with anxiety or panic attacks or depression, right? All those different areas. You may find a particular person you go, that resonates with me. And that's why I always talk to my wife. When I first met her, and she told me about all this trauma she'd been dealing with, I sensed something was wrong. I didn't know everything, but I sensed something was wrong. And she swore me to secrecy. You can never let anybody know
Mm,
this. I don't want
yeah.
anybody to know about my childhood. I don't want anybody to know about what happened to me. Now, everybody knows because
Mm,
she has no more shame about it, no more,
yeah.
regret about it. And
Yeah.
at the same time, right, she's just like, her story is out there, but her story is so powerful because it's helped so many people. When I say, oh, here's what my wife dealt with, people will go, that's me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I dealt with, right?
Mhm.
And so because my life was so different, and interesting, like you just said, is that everybody feels like, that's only happening to me. That's what my wife thought.
Mm.
What she was experiencing was unique to her. I had the opposite. Because I led this really peaceful, loving, quiet life, I thought everybody lived like that.
No.
I thought my wife was the anomaly because I'd never
Yeah.
seen that. I'd never seen that in a house. Because even if I went to my friend's house, I never saw the dysfunction because my
Yeah.
friends aren't going to show that to me and the parents
Right.
aren't going to show the dysfunction. So I just assumed everybody was living my life. And then all of a sudden, when I met my wife and I got close very quickly, I could sense there was something wrong in this house, but I wasn't sure what it was. And then then they couldn't hide it anymore because
Yeah.
I was around too much. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, how do you live with this?
Well, but you're such a great example then of someone you used your unique experiences to now do something that's going to help, that is helping support so many people around the globe. And that's where I think it feels inspiring. I know you work with a lot of, entrepreneurs or athletes or people who want to be able to use their unique talents to do something that they're excited to do. And I love that because we never are taught these things in school. You're not taught how to process trauma or how to, even all the things you've just shared so many amazing tips and ideas and things to help in the moment. But these are skills that most people never learn and truths most people never learn. Like there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not self-sabotaging. I think that this podcast is going to bring a lot of relief to people who have had those voices telling them these things. So I'm thrilled to be able to share it and just so grateful for all you're doing.
Yeah, no, and I love what you're doing. You're helping so many people. So I love to help healers like you. I to help heal more people because as we said, it's just a matter of, people are feeling like there's no answers out there. There are absolutely answers.
Yeah.
So the problem is that if they've been dealing with this all their life, if you walked with a sprained ankle for 20 years, you just assume that you're always going to have a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is heal it.
And it feels so good. It's such relief when you realize, oh, I don't have to live like that anymore. And now I think I have to go back and remember what things were like because once you're in that spot where you're feeling more present, you're not dealing with it, you're kind of moving on, with other things. You're
It
not
feels
reflecting
normal.
on it.
Yeah, it feels normal. That's why I
Yeah.
always tell people when you're in the program to start writing down things that you're noticing that are different.
Yeah.
And then have your spouse or other people tell you if they notice something that's different. Because, like you said, once you start changing, you don't even realize you've changed.
Yeah.
My wife still does this. She still, even after all this time, she'll still say, I still find I'm surprised at how differently I respond to things.
Mm.
So she's still able to experience that, which is pretty cool.
Love it. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be able to help bring a lot more people into your work. And thank you again. Thanks for all your amazing work, Dr. Wood.
Well, thanks, April. Enjoyed it. Nice seeing you again.
Do.